When you think about the Vietnam War, we always think about it from our point of view. And what's so super important is to understand both the winning point of view, the North Vietnamese, and the losing point of view, the South Vietnamese, as well as our involvement in what we could call, what we have called, a failure. And it is important to remember at all times that this was a closed communist society that did not in any way tell its people what was going on, didn't admit to defeats, didn't give death notices, and were able to sort of maintain a kind of morale because they were willing to send all that. The exact opposite of an open society that began to question almost from the beginning what we were doing there, that the early rationales weren't satisfying to a small group of people, and that group of people grew and grew and grew. It's I think a very important part of our film is watching that. And I think too that when we study war, we often only think about the conflicts between countries, but the characters in our film undergo incredible individual journeys in which they have to negotiate, sometimes do battle with aspects of their inner selves. And we find that psychological and emotional development as interesting as the outcomes of the battles on the field. In fact, they're not interrelated. This is not parallel developments. They're very much tied in with those events, but they require a different kind of sensitivity. And what we wanted in our film was the ability to be able to communicate to you the 30 battles we think you should know, the dynamics of policy decision making from Washington to Saigon to Hanoi, but also the inner life of 80 individuals that you'll come to know like family members, and some of them are the enemy. Some of them are people that are shooting at us, and it is super important, particularly because we're so desperate to understand the lessons of Vietnam, and also desperate to get it behind us, to find some closure, that we understand what they were thinking and what they were feeling, and how very similar in some cases they sound to our Marines and our Army and our Navy men who populate the American side of things.
We started thinking about this many, many years ago, and we committed to doing it in 2006. It took us a long time to make the film. It seems fitting that it's coming out right now because so many of the things that happened during the Vietnam War sort of gave birth to the problems that we see in our society today. The rancor, the sort of bitterness, the divides, the shouting, the misunderstanding, the fake news. I mean, just mistrust of each of ourselves and disillusionment with who we are as a people that Ken was just speaking about. All of the things that worry so many of us today, really you can trace back to Vietnam. But when we started the film, we were, thinking about our country in a slightly different way. We were in a different place. And at that time it seemed very relevant because we had just come out of the 2004 election, and the Swift boat issue had become central to that campaign, and it was really a question of what do we think about Vietnam? How do we value the service of the people who served? What do these medals mean? What does courage mean? What does protest mean? These were all kind of embedded in the conversation that happened around the 2004 campaign, and I think it was underlying our feeling that Vietnam was sort of beckoning to us in a way that we just had to deal with it, and that we as a country had to deal with it. And it's this unfinished business in our society. If we don't deal with it, we'll forever be haunted by it, and we don't think that's healthy for our society.